Okay, think about this for a second. You're pouring your heart and soul into something you really believe in, right? Could be ministry, a project, whatever. And you keep hitting these roadblocks, usually around, funding or just getting the support you need.
Yeah, that feeling is all too common. Like you're just juggling transactions to stay afloat.
Exactly. But what if thinking about it that way is actually sort of holding you back? Like, what if the whole funding thing isn't just logistics?
What if it's more?
Yeah. What if it could be like a spiritual formation tool, even a strategic advantage? That's really what we want to dig into today.
Right. We're going to explore these different models of partnership. We'll look at principles from the Bible, which are surprisingly relevant, and also how they're playing out now.
So it's not just about finding cash quickly.
No, not at all. It's understanding that how you get support, financial, relational, spiritual, all of it actually shapes your impact, your longevity.
Yeah.
Even you, personally. We have been looking at biblical stories, modern ministry examples.
All from that Christian biblical viewpoint on sustainability.
Exactly. Different ways people and groups work together for a mission.
So consider this a chance to maybe reframe how you see support. We're not just talking fundraising tips here.
No, it's bigger. It's about how collaboration happens, how shared vision gets achieved, moving past seeing support as just a necessary evil,
And seeing the deeper potential.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
We want to give you a framework, basically, help you understand these different partnership models so you can figure out what fits you.
Your calling, your context, your own capacity.
Right, so you can build something sustainable, impactful, and hopefully feel a bit less overwhelmed by it all.
Okay, so this idea that partnership is like deeper than just getting by, that's really interesting. Where do we start shifting that perspective?
Well, it's actually pretty amazing when you look at Scripture. Partnership isn't treated like some optional extra.
It's fundamental.
It really is. It's woven right in, like a natural rhythm almost.
Yeah.
From the Garden of Eden all the way through to the early church, you see this theme of mutual dependence, of working together.
Can you give us some examples, like specific stories from the Bible?
Sure. One of the early ones that comes to mind is Moses and Aaron.
Right. Moses felt he couldn't speak well.
Exactly. He had this clear calling, direct encounter with God, but felt totally inadequate as the spokesperson. So Aaron steps in.
His brother.
Yeah. And it's this beautiful picture of partnership based on complementary strengths. Different gifts, but fulfilling a shared purpose. Moses had the vision, maybe, and Aaron had the voice.
And together they were stronger.
Way stronger than either one alone. The insight there, I think, is that recognizing and really valuing different strengths isn't just efficient. It's kind of divinely designed.
Yeah, it wasn't about who was better, but what each brought to the table.
Precisely. And then you've got David and Jonathan. That relationship is profound.
A different kind of partnership.
Totally different. Covenantal. It went way beyond just ambition or politics. Jonathan, who was technically the heir, saw God's hand on David and chose loyalty over his own claim.
That's huge.
It is. Their bond was built on deep trust, real honor, and this shared understanding of God's bigger plan. That's the kind of partnership that lasts. It's defined by who we are together, not just what tasks we do.
That covenant piece, that deep commitment.
That's often the difference maker, I think, between partnerships that really thrive long-term and those that are just sort of functional or transactional.
So applying that today, especially in ministry, it means going beyond just agreeing on the goal.
Exactly. The partnerships that really weather storms often have that covenantal feel, that sense of deep mutual commitment. And then, of course, there's Paul in the Philippians.
Ah, yes, a classic example.
An incredibly rich one for gospel-centered support. Paul's letter to them is basically this heartfelt thank you note for their partnership in the gospel. And he emphasizes from the first day until now. Consistent.
And it wasn't just about them sending money, was it?
Oh, absolutely not. It was deeply relational. He says, I hold you in my heart. That's personal.
Wow.
It was missional, too. He calls them partakers with me of grace. They were in it together. And it was mutual. They sent him help once and again. But he was pouring back into them spiritually.
It's a two-way street.
Definitely. A reciprocal partnership. Both the sender and the sent shared in the spiritual fruit, the inheritance of the gospel. The big idea here is support isn't passive. It's active participation by everyone involved in advancing the mission.
Okay, so we've got these powerful biblical patterns. How do we see those playing out today in modern ministry partnerships?
Well, what's fascinating is how these biblical archetypes, these patterns, they really do echo in contemporary models. Take what we could call the Pauline Partner Network.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically the familiar missionary support team model. You've got individuals, churches who commit to praying regularly, giving financially, maybe offering practical help too.
Like being a contact back home or sending care packages.
Exactly that kind of thing. The shift here, the insight, is moving from seeing the missionary as the only doer and supporters as just resource providers.
To seeing everyone as participating together.
Right, a more horizontal view. Shared participation in the gospel going forward. And that shift actually benefits everyone, psychologically and spiritually. You get that sense of shared ownership, shared impact.
So the best practices in this model would reflect that relational depth we saw with Paul.
Absolutely. Things like consistent relational communication, real updates, personal connections, not just newsletters, treating supporters like genuine partners, not just names on a mailing list.
Or ATMs.
Exactly. And creating feedback loops, sharing the highs and the lows, the successes and the challenges, so you're really journeying together.
Building a real community around the mission.
That's the heart of it. The big pitfall to avoid is letting it become purely transactional, just focusing on the money and neglecting that relational investment.
Because then you lose the synergy.
You lose the synergy, the mutual encouragement, the long-term sustainability that comes from those deeper connections.
Okay, what about when different organizations try to work together? That seems common too.
Yeah, that takes us to what some call the kingdom ecosystem model. This is where you see various ministries, churches, maybe NGOs, even businesses sometimes, aligning around a shared vision for a specific outcome.
Like tackling homelessness in a city or something?
Perfect example. It's all about interdependence. Sharing resources, sharing expertise, coordinating strategically. It really reminds me of Paul's analogy of the body of Christ in 1 Corinthians 12.
Different parts, vital roles, working for the whole.
Exactly. Imagine, say, a local food bank partnering with the church, providing volunteers, and maybe a job training ministry helping clients find work, and a local business donating surplus food.
That whole network working together.
That interconnectedness, each playing a specific role towards a shared goal, like community flourishing, that's a picture of a healthy kingdom ecosystem.
So what are the best practices there?
Well, having really clear roles and agreed upon shared outcomes is crucial. Building relational equity like trust before you jump into big projects.
Getting to know each other first.
Yeah, investing in the relationships. And practicing what's sometimes called open-handed leadership. Genuinely celebrating the wins of others in the ecosystem, not feeling competitive.
And the pitfalls.
Oh, mission drift is a big one if the core purpose isn't crystal clear. And sadly, sometimes unhealthy competition for resources or recognition can creep in.
Right, you want to amplify each other and not fight over the spotlight.
Exactly. And then there's another model, often overlooked, but so vital, the Barnabas model.
Ah, Barnabas, the encourager.
Son of encouragement, yeah. He played such a key role, didn't he? Advocating for Paul when others were suspicious, mentoring John Mark after he stumbled, building bridges.
So this model is about those background supporters.
It's about the advocates, the connectors, the spiritual nurturers, the people providing essential support through encouragement, wisdom, maybe just being a listening ear when things get tough.
The ones who keep you going.
Absolutely. Best practices here involve intentionally cultivating maybe just a few deep, long-haul mentors or encouragers you really trust, and truly valuing that emotional and spiritual support, recognizing it's just as crucial often as the financial side.
And the danger is overlooking that.
Yeah, the pitfall is neglecting this less visible, intangible support because we're so focused on quantifiable results. But sometimes, honestly, a timely word of encouragement from a trusted friend is the very thing that gets you through.
Okay, wow. So we've got these different models, Pauline Network, Kingdom Ecosystem, Barnabas Encouragers. How does someone figure out which one or maybe which combination is right for them?
Yeah, that's the critical quality, isn't it? And there really is no one-size-fits-all answer. No single model is inherently best.
It's about the fit.
It's all about alignment. Aligning your calling, your specific context, your personality, your relational style. Aligning all that with the partnership approach that's actually going to sustain you and fuel your work, not drain you.
So you're not trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit, like that square peg, round hole thing.
Exactly. It's a process of discernment. Thinking through questions like, right now, for this season, am I better suited for a really tight-knit team or more of a broad network?
Or, personally, do I thrive on deep one-on-one connections, or do I get energy from lots of collaborations?
Right. Or asking, what's my context like? Am I in a situation with high external support needs, like traditional cross-cultural missions? Or am I more locally embedded where partnerships might look different?
Those are really good questions to reflect on.
And it's important to remember, too, that just engaging in partnership itself is part of our growth, our spiritual formation.
How so?
Well, it definitely cultivates humility, right?
Yeah?
Recognizing we can't do it alone. It fosters generosity, sharing our time, talents, resources, and it builds trust relying on God, often through the hands and hearts of others.
So practically, that might look like praying with partners, not just for them.
Yes. Building intentional prayer rhythms together. It means being willing to share needs and joys vulnerably to build that deeper unity. And just practicing gratitude consistently. Partnership flourishes when people feel appreciated and seen.
Looking ahead then, what's the vision? How can we approach partnership in ministry in a way that's, healthier, more sustainable, more impactful?
I think moving forward, especially in complex contexts, we really need to develop what you might call partnership literacy.
Partnership literacy.
Yeah, our collective ability to intentionally build, nurture, and adapt gospel partnerships. This involves things like training younger leaders in relational engagement and fundraising with integrity.
Not just techniques, but the heart behind it.
Exactly. Developing clear partnership covenants agreements that set out mutual expectations and accountability. Actively fostering intergenerational alliances too, mixing the wisdom of experience with fresh energy and perspectives.
Investing in the future of how we partner.
Absolutely. Because I believe the most fruitful ministries in the future won't just be about big platforms or follower accounts. They'll be defined by the depth and resilience of their networks. Networks built on trust, prayer, shared vision.
It reminds me of that relay race analogy you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, passing the baton. You don't need everyone on your team, just the right ones for that leg of the race. You're not just looking for help. You're inviting people into a holy purpose. And ultimately, it's not about building your ministry.
It's about building our ministry, God's kingdom.
Exactly. Like Aaron and Hur holding up Moses' arms. That's partnership essential, long-term support for the journey.
Okay, you touched on some specific models earlier, but let's really dive into a couple of those now. The tent-making model you mentioned, Paul. Can we unpack that more?
Sure. The tent-making model, yeah, it comes from Paul's practice of making tents to support himself. Essentially, it's self-supported ministry, using professional skills or a job to cover your own financial needs while doing ministry.
But you said it's not just about being self-reliant.
Right, that's the key insight. It's often about strategic difference. Paul sometimes chose it deliberately to protect the integrity of the gospel message.
How so?
Well, in certain contexts, accepting money might have caused misunderstandings, maybe made him look like other traveling philosophers who charged fees, so not taking money became part of his witness. The funding model itself served the message.
Wow, okay. So the how of funding reinforced the what?
Exactly. And think about tent making as a platform for presence. In Paul's day, the agora, the marketplace, was the hub of life. By working there, he was right in the thick of it, naturally meeting people.
So the modern version is the workplace.
Often, yes. In secular societies, the workplace is a primary point of contact, a sphere of influence. It's about intentionally being present as a follower of Christ in your everyday professional life.
Seeing your job as a potential mission field itself.
Precisely. And it also highlights the integrity of the messenger. Paul, standing apart financially, reinforced his sincerity. Plus, there's tent-making as leadership formation.
How does working a job form you as a leader?
Think about it. It builds diligence, humility, financial stewardship, resilience. Things we see Paul talking about, like in Acts 20. It's practical, on-the-job character development.
That makes sense.
And we see it today, right? A resurgence in creative access nations, bivocational pastors, marketplace missionaries. It makes you ask yourself, where could I be more flexible in funding? Is my profession a platform? Am I maybe too attached to one model versus the mission itself?
Good questions. You also really emphasize the Philippian partnership. Let's go back there. What makes that one stand out so much?
Yeah, the Philippian partnership, it's more than support. It's this deep connection, spiritual harmony, shared purpose, sacrificial love. It's all in there.
Paul didn't see them just as donors.
Not at all. He called them co-laborers.
Yeah.
That Greek word koinonia, it's so rich.
Yeah.
It's not just fellowship. It's deep communion, active participation, sharing life together in Christ. That shared life was the engine of their partnership.
So it was deeply personal, mutual.
Totally. Forged in affection and mission. Remember how Paul starts the letter? Thanking God for their partnership from the first day until now. Think of Lydia opening her home, her resources. It came from the heart.
And you mentioned the financial part being seen as spiritual.
Yes, this is huge.
Mm.
Paul calls their gift a fragrant offering, language straight out of Old Testament sacrifice. It elevates giving beyond mere finances to an act of worship.
That completely changes how you think about giving, doesn't it?
It really does. And it was a model of mutuality, not dependency. Paul wasn't just receiving, he was pouring his heart out for them,
Yeah.
praying for them, investing in their growth. It flowed both ways.
Trust and transparency must have been key.
Absolutely. Trust, transparency, long-term relationship. They kept supporting him over time.
Yes.
So the takeaway for us, maybe reframing support. It's not just helping someone else do ministry, it's doing ministry with them. Co-laborers. And it points to this divine economy of generosity that promised in Philippians 4:19 that God meets the needs of those who give generously for his purposes. Imagine a church culture where giving is worship, where missionaries are deeply known and loved. That's the power of this model.
Moving on from Paul, the early church itself, right after Pentecost, they had a really distinct way of handling resources, didn't they?
Oh, incredibly distinct. Acts 2 and 4 paint this picture of radical solidarity, sharing possessions, meeting needs within the community. They held everything in common.
Was that like a rule, a command?
It doesn't seem like it was legislation, more like a spontaneous overflow, a spirit-ignited love in response to what God had done. The underlying principle was this radical shift. Everything belongs to God, ultimately. And they were family now. Kinship trumped charity.
So less like giving to the poor, more like sharing within the family.
Exactly. A theology of belonging. It embodied that self-giving love of Christ. Generosity wasn't just about amounts. It was about identifying with each other.
Very communal, very interconnected.
Absolutely. And think about the power of that shared life in a divided culture. Their communal discipleship, eating together, praying together. That closeness was a powerful witness.
So how does that apply today? We can't exactly replicate Acts 2 economics everywhere.
No, probably not directly.
Hmm.
But the spirit, the principles are vital. Maybe it looks like strengthening house churches or robust, transparent benevolence funds in larger churches, or really fostering member-to-member care networks.
So people know who has needs and can respond directly.
Right. Normalizing, asking for and receiving help within the body. Building proximity-based care, mapping the assets, skills, resources already in the community, teaching kingdom stewardship. Their lifestyle gave huge credibility to the resurrection message.
It wasn't just word.
It was embodied. It's a call for us to be creatively faithful today. How do we live out that same radical love and mutual support in our context? Maybe we can become the answer to our own prayers for provision.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The agency-supported model is very common in modern missions. What are the key features there?
Right, the agency model. This is partnering with an organization, a mission agency, a denomination, etc., that provides infrastructure. Things like training, member care, fundraising platforms, strategic oversight.
So the agency handles a lot of the background stuff.
Pretty much, it's a convergence of calling and structure. The idea is the agency frees up the missionary or ministry worker to focus on their primary calling by handling complex logistics.
This visas, cultural training, maybe crisis management.
Exactly. Agencies often bring years, even decades of experience in navigating tricky things like visas, cultural adaptation, security, trauma care, things that are really hard for an individual to manage alone.
So it provides a support structure.
A vital one. But for it to work well, there needs to be good alignment between the individual's calling and the agency's culture and vision. Clear shared expectations are crucial.
And it shouldn't just be functional.
Ideally, no. The best agency partnerships feel more like family, not just bureaucracy. There needs to be ongoing mutual feedback. It's about the agency serving the spirit and the person, not just executing strategy.
Makes sense. Then there's the hybrid model. You mentioned this blends self-support and external funding.
Yeah, the hybrid model. It's basically mixing professional work for some income with traditional support raising for the rest. Very much like Paul's tent making, but maybe not fully self-funded.
Why would someone choose this?
Well, it's often very viable in places with restricted access for traditional missionaries. The professional role provides a legitimate reason for being there. It can overcome logistical hurdles and sometimes reduce local suspicion.
So it offers integration and some financial stability.
Exactly. Key strengths are often better cultural integration through work, more financial sustainability because you're not solely reliant on donors, and often unique ministry opportunities pop up naturally in that professional context.
What are the best practices for making that work?
Keeping a clear ethical line between the job and the ministry calling is important, being transparent with supporters about the blended funding, and just being flexible that the balance between work and ministry might need to shift over time. It's a really practical model for many situations today.
And one more, the digital nomad missionary. This sounds very 21st century.
It definitely is. It's that intersection of technology and mission, leveraging online work and platforms for both financial support and ministry itself.
So working remotely while doing ministry.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
The rise of remote work and location independence has opened up this whole new landscape. You can potentially live and minister almost anywhere, supported by online work, engaging people digitally or locally.
What are the advantages?
Well, potentially a global reach for evangelism or discipleship online. Financial independence through remote work. It offers incredible flexibility.
Sounds great, but are there challenges?
Oh, for sure. Setting clear boundaries between work and ministry is crucial. Prioritizing real-life relationships alongside online ones. Needing strong accountability structures, maybe more so because you're independent. And just constantly learning and adapting in the digital space. But it's a powerful, growing way people are engaging in mission.
Okay, we've explored a whole range of models here. It's a lot to take in. Is there a way to kind of compare them, see the pros and cons side by side?
Yeah, thinking about a sort of comparative matrix can be helpful. Looking at, say, agency-supported, donor-based, tent-making professional and digital nomad models. Each has its strengths and weaknesses, right?
Right.
The agency model offers structure, guidance, maybe security, but can feel less flexible. Donor-based gives flexibility but demands constant fundraising effort. Tent-making offers deep integration but needs the right professional skills. Digital nomad gives global reach, but requires tech skills and discipline, and maybe risks isolation.
So again, it really comes down to the individual and the specific situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no single best way. It's about finding the right fit for the person, the calling, the context, even things like risk tolerance.
Which leads perfectly into maybe reframing how we even think about support raising. That phrase itself can sound daunting.
It really can, and that's why shifting perspective is so important. Moving away from thinking of it as like begging for money.
Which feels awful.
It does. And moving towards partnership mobilization, that's a much healthier and frankly more biblical concept.
Based on that Philippian idea.
Exactly. Philippians 1.5 partnership in the gospel. It's an invitation to co-labor, to join in something significant together. Remember Romans 10. You need both senders and goers. It's mutual responsibility.
And accountability too.
And accountability.
Yeah.
And don't forget prayer. 2 Corinthians 1.11 talks about the power of many praying. That's vital partnership too.
So practically, it's changing our language.
Changing language, yes.
Yeah.
Talking about partners, not just donors. Engaging the whole church body. Empowering supporters to see themselves as truly essential contributors, not just spectators writing checks.
Building that team of coworkers.
That's it. And hearing from people actually doing this is powerful. We hear from, say, a long-term missionary echoing that Philippian idea. It's mutual investment. Prayer, encouragement, finance, feeling like one team.
Not just a transaction.
Never just a transaction. And then you hear from someone leading a sending agency, emphasizing Romans 10 and 7 Corinthians 1, resources and prayer hand in hand. That dual commitment from both sides. It really drives home that this is shared work.
It's also interesting to see how these approaches have changed over time, isn't it? Like historically.
Yeah, looking at the historical evolution is fascinating. You see the early church's radical sharing in Acts, then Paul's strategic tent making, later the rise of mission agencies and more structured donor-based models.
And now these newer adaptations like hybrid and digital nomad.
Exactly, driven by globalization, technology, but the constant, the core that runs through all of it, shared mission. A commitment to advancing the gospel together.
And underpinning all of this is a fundamental belief about God, right?
Absolutely. The core theological foundation.
Yeah.
God provides through people. Scripture is just full of God's faithfulness, often shown through the generosity and actions of his people.
So we're stewards.
We're stewards of everything God gives us: time, talent, treasure meant to be used for his kingdom. And prayer is indispensable in releasing that provision. James 5, 2 Corinthians 1 again.
So for us listening, what does that mean practically?
It means seeing giving as participation, not just duty. It means praying expectantly, trusting God's timing even when it feels slow, and just being open to how God might want to use us in partnership, both giving and receiving.
Okay, as we navigate all this, what are some key things to watch out for? Nuances, potential pitfalls.
Good question. One big one is contextualization. Don't just rigidly copy a model because it worked somewhere else. Be flexible, spirit-led. Discern what fits your specific situation.
Makes sense. What else?
Look beyond financial investment. Remember the power of relational generosity, courageous companionship, standing with someone. That's partnership too. Aim for partners, not patrons.
And integrity?
Huge. Integrity and transparency are non-negotiable. Mutual accountability. Authentic updates the good and the bad. Clear financial reporting. Lots of gratitude.
What about balancing faith and planning? Sometimes people swing too far one way.
Yeah, that's the danger of over-spiritualizing budget planning. Trusting God doesn't mean neglecting practical wisdom. Luke 14 talks about counting the cost. Faith needs feet, needs responsible planning.
Finding that balance.
Exactly. And finally, aim for interdependence, not dependence. The goal should be mutual benefit, empowering local leaders, not creating relationships where one side is always just receiving.
Moving towards that Philippians 4.17 idea, fruit that increases to their credit too.
Precisely. Mutual flourishing.
So, with all these considerations, how does someone actually figure out their path? Discern the best course for them?
It really is a process of charting your course with prayer and wisdom, balancing faith and practicality, trusting God's timing.
Are there tools that can help?
Yeah, sometimes using something like a model selector worksheet can provide clarity. It prompts you to think through your calling, context, skills, resources, risk tolerance, relational style, sustainability.
Forces you to articulate those things.
Exactly. And another really powerful practice is peer consultation.
Talking it through with trusted friends or mentors.
Yes, sharing your thinking, your questions, with a few wise people who know you and are willing to offer honest feedback. Asking specific questions and then really listening to their perspective.
To catch blind spots or get new ideas.
Definitely. Test your assumptions, expand your perspective, surface risks you hadn't seen. Listen, discern, act, and then maybe revisit the conversation later. It acknowledges that God often guides us through community.
That peer consultation idea sounds incredibly helpful. Can you say a bit more about why that's so valuable?
Well, the power of peer consultation goes beyond just getting advice. It's about testing your assumptions in a safe space, right? Hearing from people with different experiences broadens your view significantly. They might see risks or opportunities you completely missed. It fosters humility, too, recognizing you don't have all the answers.
So how do you do it effectively?
Choose your peers wisely, people you trust, who know your heart, who offer diverse perspectives, and will speak truthfully but kindly. Then be clear about your model, your challenges, your questions. Ask specific things.
And the key is really listening.
Absolutely. Listen to understand, not just to respond or defend. Prayerful discernment of their input is crucial. Then reflect, act on what resonates, and keep the conversation going as things evolve. It's mutual sharpening, recognizing God often speaks through others.
Like having a personal board of advisors grounded in discernment.
Something like that, yeah. And when you bring all these threads together, the biblical roots, the modern models, the discernment process, you start to see this beautiful picture, weaving a stronger tapestry together.
A biblical vision for partnership.
Exactly. Moving beyond transactions to something relational, covenantal, spirit-formed, mission-driven. Like the Philippians, it reflects the Trinity, almost unity, diversity, mutual deference, shared purpose.
Bringing our unique gifts, communicating openly.
Evaluating partnerships based on God's purposes, not just ours. And always resting in God's ultimate provision, not just our own plans. Embracing our interdependence as one body.
So to really bring this all home for everyone listening,
the main takeaway is that partnership is complex, it's vital, it's biblical, and it adapts. There's no single right model. The key is finding the alignment between your calling, your strengths, your context, and the mission God has given you.
Moving beyond just transactions.
Yes. Embracing that deeper potential of real relational collaboration.
And it finally, maybe a thought to sit with after the steep dive is over. Something inspired by one of those reflective prompts.
Yeah, this is a good one to ponder.
If your ministry or your project or just your work in the world, if it was an intricate tapestry whose threads are missing right now, who might God be nudging you to invite in?
Not just for support, remember.
Right, not just for support, but for fullness, for a richer, more complete picture. Maybe take some real time with that question in your own context.
Perhaps revisit some of the questions or exercises we talked about. Think about how these different models might offer fresh perspectives or new solutions for you.
Because cultivating these kinds of partnerships, it's a journey, isn't it?
It's definitely a journey of faith and wisdom working together. But it's a journey that leads to greater impact and, honestly, a much richer experience for everyone involved.